logging on. So shall we get started? Okay, so hopefully folks had a chance to look at the agenda. Just a quick overview, welcome introductions, organizational matters, and then into the meat of the meeting of the timeline goals and our objectives for public engagement and next steps. But the first order of business is to review the agenda for any additions, removals, or adjustments. Anything anybody wants to add or rearrange? Okay, so I will start with welcomes and introductions. I'm Valerie Caples. I'm the town administrator for Bristol, and I want to welcome all of you and thank you all very much for your willingness to participate in this process. Hopefully it'll be a satisfying experience and lead the town through a very transformative time. Porter had suggested that each person share with the committee 3 words that describe your hopes and goals for this committee, and also what is one fun or surprising fact about you. And I apparently, since I'm starting, I guess I'll start.
Valerie, just a quick question. If we want to put a flip chart thing up so I can write down what people say, I have to share my screen, which it says I can't do because host disabled participant screen sharing. So
you can't share your screen?
I can't share my screen. So if you want us to capture it that way.
I made you a co-host.
It says it doesn't think I'm a host. But anyway, it's okay. We can do it without.
Delmonico is the co-host.
So that I think maybe I just corrected that.
Sorry.
Okay.
Now you've got co-host now.
All right. So let me just turn that on, and then, okay.
Super.
Yeah.
So my 3 words for the goals are priorities, infrastructure, and leverage.
And what's a fun fact about you?
I was trying to think of something, and I think just about everybody around is into genealogy, so that's not new and interesting. But what folks probably don't know is that I used to be a portrait artist. Yeah. So back in the day, haven't drawn anything in 10 years, but yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Cool.
That's it for me. So why don't we,
Valerie, why don't you pass the baton to anybody besides me, and then each person will pass the baton.
I'm going to go down the list alphabetically. Betsy Blair. And folks, remember to unmute. I'm not seeing Betsy on the screen. Oh, there's Betsy. Betsy, can you unmute? Hit the space bar.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
You are.
Yes, you are.
Okay, there wasn't anything available to click.
Ah.
Okay, well, we're setting the priorities, and I think that it's probably helpful to think in terms of one shot rather than things that would be ongoing programs. I can't do one word things. I don't, you know.
That's okay.
I'm going to pass on that. And
3 ideas. What are your other ideas?
Well, they're very specific. You want to know about some of them? I'm interested in water and sewer issues, and I have a number of things I'd like to bring up with that. I have a lot of different.
We'll get into the meat and potatoes at the next meeting.
No,
Okay.
it's hard for me to do that. And the fun fact that I already brought up at the first time with the selectmen was that I am a retired construction worker.
Mhm. Great.
I mean, there's a
Betsy,
lot
who
of
do you-
funny stuff about me, but it just is not one word things.
Who do you want to
Thank
pass
you,
the
Betsy.
baton to?
And I'm not allowed to pass it to Porter.
Oh, no, we're going are we going alphabetical?
Yeah, we're
Diane
going
Cushman.
alphabetical.
Okay,
Diane will
Diane.
be next.
Okay, can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
You are.
Unmuted.
Okay. So I also have trouble with a single word. So I have infrastructure needs, recognizable improvements, and I'm thinking by the public, and maximum use of money.
Cool.
And I'm afraid that
what's an interesting fun
I
fact
can't
about
come
you?
up with a fun fact. I'm sorry.
How about that you're the town health officer?
Well, I am the town health officer and I'm a retired nurse. So my interest, goes in those directions.
Excellent. Thank you, Diane.
Mm-hmm.
Next in line is Allison.
Hi. I thought of thoughtfulness of our exchanges with each other. That's a hope and dream for me. Accountability for when we are interacting with the public and that public engagement forum. And then learning that this is all, new to us, and we're going to be learning lots of things and reporting out, and how important it is to learn from each other in this process. A fun fact, I have a 17-month-old French Bulldog puppy that you can see me look away because she's so naughty. I think she was like grabbing on the cords to this. And anyhow, so that's my interesting fact. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Line is Mike Dash.
Hello, everybody. I will try to stick with one word because apparently I like to follow the rules at times. Only because I had no way to come up with other words. I'm going to go with future, opportunity, and I think equity is the third one that feels important to me. I don't know if I have a particularly fun fact, but I will share regardless. A decent chunk of my job involves performing surgery on rat brains.
On surgery on what?
On the brains of rats.
Brains of rats. Must be pretty microscopic.
They're a bit tiny, yeah.
Oh my. Well, I don't think we'll need that skill on this committee. But thank you
hope
very
not.
much. So the next is Porter.
I'll say impact and leverage. And I couldn't determine whether I wanted to say inclusion or engagement, but so spelling issues.
I think inclusion includes engagement.
Yeah, so you think I'm being redundant if I say both? Yeah, so that's
No,
it.
put them both.
So yeah, fun fact. I currently have an 18-year-old Afghan refugee living with me. He just started Mount Abe today. He's super excited about that. He's learning English. He's only been here for a short time, and he is the 12th child to live in my home. So I have loved 12 children.
Of mixed origins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Porter. Next in line, if John McCormick is signed in now, he would be next. I see a phone number.
Hi,
Good
John.
evening, John McCormick, yes. And I'm a
Thank
member
you.
of the Bristol Energy Committee. And I guess my three words is electrification, leverage, and opioid treatment. And I guess my fun fact, I have 31 chickens, 17 of which are roosters. And I'm really open to anyone who would like a rooster.
Don't everybody junk at once.
My goodness.
Well, they're friendly. We just can't eat them. They all have names.
Oh.
Understood. I used to have ducks. Maybe that's another fun fact. Well, thank you, John. Next in line is Chris Purley.
All. My words are no special interest. I came up with just sort of that one phrase. Fun fact, probably the random fact of the night is that Porter and I have both done the same job for the town of Bristol before. We both managed the landfill here in town.
That's right.
Before it was closed.
It's a fun fact.
Interesting. Thank you, Chris. Next in line would be Robert Rooker.
So the 3 words I came up with were smart, growth, opportunities. And a fun fact about me is I have almost 80 screws inside my body.
That's a lot of screws.
On purpose?
Result of some surgery, but
Oh my
they're
goodness.
supposed to be there.
Well, hopefully they're doing the right thing.
They are.
Oh, good. You must be fun to go through the airport security with.
Oh, it's all titanium, so it doesn't set it off.
Great.
Well, that's good. Thank you, Robert. Do you like to go by Rob or Robert?
Rob is fine.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. The next in line is Helen Young, last but not least.
Hi, my 3 words are energy, independence, and smart. And you can put all those together and get an idea of my leanings. Interesting fact about me is, at least among very close friends, I like to settle arguments by leg wrestling.
Leg wrestling.
Okay.
I'm really good.
Wow. Thanks for the warning.
Yeah. I see we have a number of members of the public, and I have these sort of like little extra slides that I can bring in. If everybody's agreeable, I'd love to hear from Jim and
Anthony.
Anthony and Ian and Sally and Jessica. Are people okay with that? I figure if they're interested enough to weigh in, I'm happy to hear.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. For not only the 3 words, but the fun facts too.
I'll go. Realistic, practical, financially responsible.
I'll fix that typo in a minute.
And no fun facts about me.
No, oh, come on. You know you have them, Jim.
We don't delve into personal situations.
Okay, realistic, practical, and what was the last one?
Financially responsible.
Wow, my typing's going downhill. Okay, cool.
So we received a chat that Sally would just prefer to listen today.
Okay, that's fine. Anthony, Ian, Jessica? Bob?
I can go next if other people aren't ready yet.
Sure.
Although I don't know if I have 3, but you probably won't hold me to the limit, right? I think I just have mostly 1, which is transformative, that I hope that, whatever investments we make are things that will really change the way things are done, maybe make certain futures possible. I think that might be close to did somebody have like no business as usual or something like that? I think it might be close to that.
Cool. Very nice. Thank you, Jessica. Anthony, how about you?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Anthony Delmonico. I'm actually the treasurer of the town of Bristol.
Yay.
The three things I can think of are connectivity, infrastructure, both internal and external. So you can take it as physical or otherwise. And let's toss up. I'll put down water and sewer as well, because I think that's important.
Terrific. Do you want to share an interesting fact?
Yeah, I think some of you might know this, but I'm actually severely colorblind, to the point where some days I might be able to see a few colors, other days might be totally black and white.
Hmm.
So it makes for a fun existence.
Well, I appreciate that you shared that with us, because so much of what we share, so much information that we share is online and through web links and things like that. And for you, it's difficult to distinguish between a hyperlink or
Oh
something
yeah,
that's
I just
underlined.
kind of aimlessly look for the underline thing. But no, seriously, both my computer at work and my personal work one at home are so oversaturated in color, to the point where my assistant treasurer looked at my screen one day and he's like, "What happened?" So yeah.
And I also appreciate that you shared that, so that it helps us to be mindful of other people in the community who may
That's really helpful.
also have to deal with that, and how we can think about how we present information. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. And Jessica posted it in the chat that her fun, interesting fact is that she was once in a Chinese jail.
That's a story for a cocktail party. Bob or Ian, do either of you want to weigh in?
I would. I'm a member of the board of the Turning Point Center of Addison County. My 3 words would be addiction recovery support.
Do you want to share anything interesting that you'd like us to know?
Well, the amount of addictions, a variety of different addictions, drugs and alcohol and whatever, are so horribly affecting all people in Vermont, both people who are actually addicted, but also family members. And especially during this COVID period of time, it's been really stressful. And you probably have, I don't know if you've seen the reports from the Department of Health in regards to the number of overdose deaths in Vermont. It's the highest percentage in any state in the country. People who are get into recovery need help staying in recovery and not doing a relapse.
Thank you, Bob. Ian, do you want to add thoughts, hopes, or goals?
Sure. Helpful, exciting, and sustainable.
Exciting. That's kind of a high bar. Okay,
well,
cool.
This is a wonderful collection of words and thoughts and expressions.
Yeah, and so hopefully we can play with this later on the agenda when we talk about goals, and we can see how these align with the ARPA funding parameters, and they can sort of be a starting place for us to steer our next steps.
So it looks as though we're ready to move on to the next section of the agenda, which is organizational matters. I want to thank everybody for all of your contributions to that particular exercise. It was very nice. The next item on the agenda would be select a chair, a vice chair, and a note taker. And the other day, I shared with you an article that Porter wrote about speed minutes. So hopefully that will be remove a barrier from anybody who's interested and available to be a note taker and would be willing to step up for that.
So it'll probably be no shock to anybody that I, in that conversation, also said that I was planning to put myself forward as chair. So I would be very happy to chair this committee. If there's somebody else who really wants to chair the committee, I'm happy, to collaborate, but I'm psyched to do it. So I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, I don't know how unless if you could unshare your screen so we can see everybody. We'll kind of take a vote. Porter's nominated herself to serve as chair. Does anybody?
I'd like to second.
Okay, seconded by Betsy. Show of hands for support or does anybody want to nominate anybody else as chair? I see heads going this way. Okay, so show of hands for support. Any declines, any negatories? I see none. Well, congratulations, Porter, and thank you.
Why, thank you.
And so the next item would be a vice chair in the event that Porter's unavailable to either attend a meeting or follow through on a particular thing or wants somebody to collaborate with.
Right, and yeah, to work together, I would hope.
Right, to kind of help carry the ball. Would anybody like to step forward as a vice chair? Don't all rush at once.
Step up if nobody else really wants the job.
Thank you, Chris. Excellent.
Thank you, Chris.
Any other suggestions or nominations or stepping forwards? I'm not seeing any. So show of support for Chris being vice chair. Hands raising. Okay, excellent. Anyone declining or negatory? Nays. I'm not seeing any. Thank you. Well, congratulations, Chris, and thank you. Thank you both for stepping forward for those important positions. The next important position is that of note taker. Is anyone, I see cringe.
Let me just say, if you haven't had a chance to read the article, basically the point of the speed notes or the speed minutes is the idea that what is really critical for transparency in communication is making sure that all of the decisions and next step actions are made clear. And that's important for accountability as well as progress. But the problem is that if the note-taking demand is to be an extensive narrative, then that removes the note taker from engagement. There's a lot of neuroscience research on this, says that you can take thorough notes, or you can participate, but probably can't do both if you're taking narrative notes. So, so what I really want is everybody on this team to feel like they can be completely involved. And I want to make sure that every meeting comes out with crystal clear actions and outcomes so we know where we're headed next. And so we move forward from every meeting to every meeting. So that should make the note taking a lot easier. And yeah, so.
I'd like to add something, and that is that I think it's very important to keep track of the exact wording of what we're voting on. And I think we need to read that before we vote so that it's clear and it's not just somebody's sense of what it was sort of about. But I think in terms of transparency to the public, we need to be very specific about what it was we voted to do.
When we actually vote, as opposed to in just a conversation or a dialogue. Like today, we don't have any pressing votes that are happening.
No, I'm just saying when we start voting about what kinds of projects we want to fund, I think that somebody should later be able to read it and say, you voted for such and such, you know, and
Sure.
It should be what we really did vote for.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah.
So we have a chat from Jessica Teets, and she says that if it makes it easier, I just lost my chat. If it makes it easier I will often take notes and share them on Front Porch Forum, like I do for the select board meetings. So you can just add. I'm not following the rest of that sentence, but
I was
and
just
it's
saying
just-
that if it makes it easier for somebody to volunteer, I'll probably take notes and can share them. So you just have to add to them. So the first time or two, you know, you'd have somebody helping you.
Oh,
So
I see. You want to
might
be an
not be such a
assistant
hard
note,
job.
an
Well-
assistant note taker.
Yeah. So for clarity, I mean, I'll just share my screen again. So this is basically what speed notes look like. So we have an agenda, which is explicit and publicized ahead of time. So everybody in the public knows what we're planning to discuss. And then the speed note taker simply would say, for example, they would write in who was chosen here and what meeting schedule we've set. None of these things really have any actions. But here there might be some action coming out of the public engagement. There might be action coming out here. So all that the speed notes record is who's doing what next. Or as Betsy said, if we get to a point where we're making an actual decision, then the actual language of what we're voting for would be spelled out and there would be a vote. So it would say, as in Robert's rules, motion made, and it would spell out the motion made by, second by, and voted. So there's no narrative. So if a community member, you know, Jessica or anybody else wants to attend a meeting randomly on their own and type it up, they can. But our expectation is not that we have extensive notes, but our expectation is always that we have clarity of decision making.
I can do that then.
Thank you.
I feel like
That
that's
would
a
be-
lot. Yeah, that's a lot easier than what I thought I was going to have to do. Like so-and-so said this and so-and-so said
Right,
that.
right.
And like,
Yeah.
that seemed overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
This seems doable. So,
Okay. And so one of the things that we can do as the note taker, and Chris can help me with this too, is before we move on from one agenda item to the next, is to always make sure that Allison as the note taker knows if there's anything we expect to be written down there. So for item number 1 under organizational matters, if you record who those 3 people are, that's awesome. And then next we're going to talk about meeting schedule and what we're hoping for and what we're tentatively planning there. And you'll write that down. And then I'm not anticipating that you'll need to take notes because most of what we're going to hear from today is Valerie sort of filling us in background with this, reviewing the materials that she already emailed to all of us, which presumably everybody's already read. And we'll include those in the notes. So those will be, anytime we have handouts or things, those will be part of our packet. Ian, you have your hand up?
Yes. This is a question for Val. I know there has to be a minimum amount of minute information in terms of at the state level. Does the speed notes cover that?
You need to record who attended.
And what was decided.
The date and location of the meeting, and the basic actions that were made. Yeah.
Okay, so that sounds fine. I guess I would ask, given that this is a different approach than most of the committees that we have for the town, including select board, that a link to the video be included in the notes that are taken, either to the Neat site or to the YouTube, just so if people want to see a full discussion as opposed to just the speed notes, that it's there available to them.
Well, because the written notes are they're going to last a long time, the links, any kind of links will die over time. The videos will no longer be available like in 5 years or, but on the website, on the Town of Bristol website, in the meetings and agendas section, there's a section for this committee where the agenda is posted, the minutes will be posted, and there's a column where the video link can be posted.
That's cool.
Great.
And there's a link on the homepage of the Bristol website where the meetings are listed, and the most current meeting is listed first. And there's a link to that meetings and agendas section where those documents can be found. Same thing with all the other committees. I would like to request, though, that, well, I don't know, sometimes it is nice for the written record to reflect. So, like, for example, under one of the upcoming agenda items, the review of timeline and key benchmarks. Sometimes it's nice to be able to capture some of the material of that discussion. to be able to refer to.
Yeah, well, that's why I said like the slides can be attached. So all meeting materials can be included on that webpage.
Okay.
Because I agree, that's helpful.
I'm the last person on earth to argue about minutes, so. So with that, I think it sounds like, was there a agreement, a consensus that Allison would, as note taker?
Absolutely.
Say that again?
I'm all in. I love it.
I got it. Porter, can you unshare your screen for a little bit?
Yeah, sorry.
I want to be able to see everybody. Super.
Do we
Well-
need to vote? Should we be voting?
Sure,
on-
let's make it official. Seeing no other nominations for note taker, is there a vote of agreement for Allison? Show of hands. Thank you. I see no nays, so that's good. Thank you, Allison, very much for taking that on. The subject of meeting schedule might be a little bit premature because we want to, we might need to be informed about the upcoming agenda item regarding timeline and key benchmarks. But in general, what are I'm interested in people's thoughts. When the select board voted or agreed to form this committee was not intended to be an onerous time commitment for everybody. I guess at some point we need to figure out, is once a month enough? What can people, how does it fit into other people's schedules and that kind of thing with other commitments? I know that for some people, this Monday night of the month is the only time that works. So it might end up being just once a month during this second Monday of each month. So
Yeah, I would hope
maybe-
that we could meet once a month or less, that we could be doing some work in between times to share back with the group when we come together. And maybe we wait until we talk about, our next steps in item number 5, and then, commit at that time to our next meeting.
That sounds like a plan. I just wanted to put the idea out there of a regular meeting schedule. Whether we have to determine it at this moment in time isn't necessarily that important.
What is our overall time frame? Is there a deadline by which?
There is, and we'll get to that further down on the agenda.
But that might help us decide how frequently we meet.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's why I thought maybe this was a bit premature on the agenda, but
Okay.
still something we need to think about. The next one about communications, I just wanted to make folks aware that this committee does fall under the open meeting law, where the meetings need to be posted publicly. There needs to be minutes, and most importantly, that anything that a quorum of the committee discusses needs to be in what's described as open session, open to the public to hear and respond to. So in other words, email communications, anything substantive, any debates or discussions back and forth by email is not an accepted practice. It's okay to use email for procedural things or particular questions of process, or to verify, are we meeting on Tuesday or whatever. I mean, it's okay to use email that way, but not to engage in a discussion. And it's also good to be aware that all emails associated with the work of this committee are considered to be public records. So if ever, for some reason, there's a request for information, you might be asked to provide it from your private emails. So I just wanted to make folks aware of that through this.
I have a question.
Certainly.
Now I'm interested in sewer and water. So I would like to talk to the various person or persons who are involved in that in our town government and ask them some questions. Is that something that I should do as an individual? Or should that person be invited to address the group?
So Betsy, I'm hoping that when we get to the conversation about public engagement, that we'll be talking about our next steps as a group to do outreach within the community, and certainly talking to people who are involved in infrastructure decisions is going to be a critical part of that. And so if you're particularly interested in water and sewer, then I would hope that you would be on the team of people who will be engaging in that particular outreach. So we would hope that we would be having that conversation as an information gathering as part of this group and bringing it back to the whole group.
Okay.
Also, to follow up on your specific question, for any member, it's perfectly okay to communicate by email, to solicit information, or request clarification, or other kinds of procedural kinds of things. And requesting information or wanting to talk with somebody, that's perfectly fine. But having a quorum of the group engage in a conversation is under the umbrella of the open meeting law.
Like a decision making. We're not going to shape decisions outside of our formal meetings.
Right, but so presumably there will be a subcommittee, as it were, on water and sewer, and is that something we set up tonight? Or when does it start taking an action-oriented format?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to be.
Items.
Yeah, let's get through some of the organizational matters and see where we are for next steps. And then I think we'll address that as we go along. So we'll get there.
Yeah. Thank you, Porter. The last part for me is just, I want to draw your attention to the conflict of interest policy that I emailed out at least once or twice. I'm not going to go through it. I just want folks to be aware of it, that it does apply to this committee and the work of the committee. So if anybody has any questions about what's in that conflict of interest policy, don't hesitate to ask at any time. So that's all I have to say about that. And with that, I am happy to turn this over to the chair, Porter, to go through the rest of the business.
Well, and I think that that will still allow you to do the presentation part for the overview timeline and initial aspects of goals, and then we'll segue from learning, from the presentation piece to actually, starting to do our own work as a group. So I'm guessing that everybody read all of the materials that Valerie sent out. There were some terrific links in there. So a couple of the summaries in terms of the overview of ARPA. The first is just like the basic bottom line, how much money is there? So, $350 billion nationwide, 1.2-ish billion in Vermont. What that sugars down to for us is a little over 1.1 million. So it's a big chunk of change for our little town. That's about how much money we can expect to see. And we actually have 574,236.89 cents of that already in the bank. So we got that last year. And then towards the end of the second quarter or early in the third quarter of this year, we'll get the next 574,000. So we have half of it sitting here waiting for the town to decide what to do about that. Another half will be coming. And actually, I'm just going to jump ahead to the timeline since that's a question. So this is kind of what the timeline looks like. So we got the first payment in July of 2021. So, in the second quarter, give or take. Today's
cursor just for those dots.
Yeah. So first money came. Here's where we are today on this dot, today's meeting. Second payment will come middle of this year. So we have, 2 years and a bit before we have to decide exactly what we want to do with it. So this is our time frame for doing our research, making our recommendations to the select board so that they can move ahead with whatever needs to happen if there's bond voting or who knows what. Yeah, Valerie.
Just to clarify, the obligation of the funds means that there needs to be a signed contract with somebody to do the work we want to have done, which there's an awful lot of lead time prior to that in order to get to that point. First, of course, deciding what it is we want to do, getting agreement from the select board that that's what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, developing the scope of work for what it is we want done, putting it out to bid, and then having a successful contractor bid on the project. And only after those steps do we reach that dot that you just spoke of about the December 2024 date. So, yeah.
So realistically, our commitment as a team is for a shorter period of time because all of that heavy lifting is done by staff. So I don't know, Valerie, how far you want to back us up, but to have us looking, are we looking at a year and a half? And you want us, to have our decision-making and recommendations to the select board by, December of 2023. So you have a full 12 months. What does that look like for you?
I think as a conservative benchmark, yes.
Okay.
I think it's possible to achieve it sooner than that, but
Okay.
I think a year would certainly leave time to develop the programs and the scope of work and bidding and all of that stuff.
So the good news for us as a group is that this is not a widely open-ended commitment. Even if we do end up meeting as often as once a month, we're looking at a year and a half, maybe at the tops. And then maybe, the select board or the staff want us to reconvene here or there between the time that we make a recommendation to them, the contracts are signed, and the money is actually spent. But, there's a long period of time before it has to get spent. We have to make a commitment well before that. So that's kind of what the timeline looks like. I don't know if there's questions on the timeline for folks.
I'm actually remembering, and it's probably written down in some of the earlier communications when the select board first chose to create this committee. I think the select board's original thinking was that the committee would only need to meet for 1 year, but
yeah,
I think we'll do what we need to do.
Yeah, so that's fine. One point that I found really compelling is the idea that any interest earned while that money sits in the town of Bristol's hands is unencumbered by ARPA rules. So there are some really clear guidelines for how ARPA money needs to be spent, but any interest that we earned is unencumbered by that. So I think we want to be mindful of that. And, I'm sure that the town will be doing its best to have that money be earning interest where it can. But any interest that's earned will be unencumbered. And so we may, as a committee, a year and a half from now, want to make recommendations on how any earned interest is spent, whether it's spent along the lines that we're interested in here, recommendations that we make, or whether we want to recommend to the select board that they use that money for something else. But I thought that was a really interesting point in all the literature that we read.
Thank you for catching that. Diane has a hand up.
Yeah.
Porter, just clarify what unencumbered by means.
So that
You
1
said-
point, 1.1.
Yeah, the interest is unencumbered by that. What does that mean?
That means that we don't have to spend it according to ARPA guidelines. We can do whatever.
No, I'm talking about that. You were referring to interest, I thought.
Yeah, so there's there's 574,000 plus that is currently in Bristol's hands, and the town puts that in like a CD or something at a bank. So it's earning a little something. Whatever that earns is not restricted to the ARPA rules.
In other words, it's extra money.
We could spend it.
Yeah, we can spend it. So
It
this
becomes
committee
ours. Okay.
Yes, so this committee can recommend to the town of Bristol that money gets spent for the same programming or, whatever we recommend, or we could say to the town, we recommend that you use this for something else entirely, or like whatever. But that's, 500,000 plus sitting there earning interest now and another 574,000 coming soon. And it's just an interesting point that the ARPA spending rules are fairly clear. And this is money that is not.
Great, thank you. That's helpful.
That was a good question. Back to you, Porter.
Well, so ARPA eligible uses. There, I don't know if you wanted to, everybody got that Appendix 1 expenditure categories. It was one of the documents that Valerie shared with us. So if you recall that, it gave 7 categories of eligible use: public health, negative economic impacts, services to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, infrastructure, revenue replacement, and administrative. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns information actually summarized that into 4 categories. So they summarize it into public health and negative economic impacts of COVID. So you could spend the money to support households, small businesses, nonprofits, or give aid directly to impacted industries like tourism, travel, and hospitality. There's no thing there. Infrastructure investments, water, sewer, or broadband. Premium pay to support workers performing essential work during the COVID emergency, or revenue replacement. So those are sort of the 4 broad categories. These are like the 7 more specific categories, and that handout, Appendix 1, gives even more detail within that. So when we think about where we want to make an impact, we're going to be looking at these general areas. So if it doesn't fall into one of these general areas, then we can capture it and sort of like in a parking lot and say to the select board, hey, you know, we're getting a lot of feedback that this is an important thing, but it's not really something that we can recommend ARPA money is going to be spent on. So that's kind of what the ARPA funding parameters are. I don't know if Valerie, you have anything to add, or if people have questions. Again, I'm sure most of you read the material that was sent out, which had this explanation in greater detail, but.
The only thing I would add, and I don't want to get down into the weeds about it, but the revenue replacement is a very broad category where the recent guidance from the Treasury has decided that municipalities can basically, like a standard deduction of up to $10 million as revenue replacement. And if municipalities choose to spend the money that way, then the money becomes municipal money, and it's not encumbered by the ARPA guidelines.
Right.
There's much broader uses.
Revenue replacement, of course, assuming that the community lost significant revenue because of COVID, which I believe the data suggests they did not.
Actually, we did, mainly
bit.
through the recreation department, but
Okay.
but the Treasury guidance does not require you to document it. It's like a standard deduction. You just take it, and there's no reporting about it. So it's a kind of a peculiar twist in this.
We can look at that further.
That's a loophole big enough to drive a truck through, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, exactly. And VLCT is cautioning municipalities in how they choose to apply that.
And I have to say that honestly, I don't think that revenue replacement would hit any of our hopes and goals. Nothing anybody said's got any goodness coming out of that. So we can explore that as we move along, but I'm pretty sure that with this committee so far, that's not sounding like a really appealing option, but that's okay. It's also not something that's recommended by the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. So while they have produced information explaining that's a possibility, their materials show really strongly what they call your target, that little sweet spot between, you know, good governance, leveraging the aid, and investing in best uses for long-term recovery. Revenue recovery is probably not going to be in the sweet spot because all it does is, you know, set the town up for, you know, having to make up, you know, it just makes things softer in the short run. But having said that, it is one of the options. I thought this was a really great slide from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and I always appreciate their guidance. But I thought that I thought this was a great slide, so I wanted to include it and talk about that, you know, that target between good governance, with, stakeholders and following allowable rules under ARPA, following good governance procedures, and then leveraging the aid, looking for where there's collaboration, coordination, efficiency options, and learning from others. I think that's all good stuff we want to do. And then really looking for best uses for long-term recovery. So that's why I wanted to include this slide from the materials that Valerie sent out. So yeah, that's sort of the overview of ARPA parameters. Then the next two slides are about the timeline, which we already looked at. Any questions on that before we go back to the goal conversation? Okay.
When the screen is being shared, we can only see a handful of folks at a time. So if folks,
I'm
do
glad
have
you keep
something they wanna
reminding me of that.
say,
Yeah, because
to use the
I
raise hand
Right.
feature of Zoom, because that moves your image, your screen up to the top to be recognized. So you
And
move
I have
from
two
page
screens,
4.
so I can still see everybody all the time, even with the slideshow, because I have two screens. So I
Mhm.
forget that depending on how your screen is set up, you might only see a couple people at a time.
Right, right.
So the goals conversation brings us back to some of those hopes and dreams that we had. And I guess I want to just have a little bit of a conversation there with people. Like, I think we understand from the timeline that, we have to, within a fairly short time, a year and a half, get some recommendations to the select board. And so, we need to gather information and explore options between now and then. The next item on our list is, the question of public engagement, how we're going to do that. But assuming that we all agree that we need to make recommendations to the select board within a particular time frame, and we want to gather information and identify things between now and then, are there other goals that we're hoping to achieve here? What else are we expecting of ourselves in this? I see this on the agenda. I didn't know, Valerie, if you had, specific goals you were looking for us to articulate here, or if other committee members did.
Well, that was on the original draft of the agenda before you introduced the exercise of people identifying their 3 words up front. So so we kind of jumped ahead on that. But for me, one goal that I'm really glad was expressed early on was equity. Because the other things are more tangible, infrastructure, and some of those other things are more tangible, but equity is less tangible. And I hope that continues to be among the goals.
And when you share that idea of equity, what is your sense for that? Do we have a way to measure equity now in the community?
Not really, and maybe equity is a broad term of including people who might not have internet, for example, in the discussion, including people who might not be fully aware of the opportunity to weigh in on this thing. How do we reach out to them? How do we reach out to marginalized people in our community that might have some good ideas? I guess for me, the term equity in this case kind of covers those things.
Allison.
I would like something in regards to early learning in our children. I'm not sure how or what, but I do think that needs to be a topic of discussion about our earliest of learners coming into our school system, but what their homes are like and how we can better and wrap around all of that. These are our next generation of kiddos, and I feel like this is just something that, I'm definitely passionate about. And I would just like to say that. Thanks.
Great.
I might just jump in with some a broad sort of reiteration of some of this. And, one of the things that seems like to me in the context of some of the single words and phrases that were shared was there's this sense for the future and sense for opportunity and sense for equity. And it seems like, and sense for transformation, somebody said, which I really love. And it seems to me like at a first level, we need to really identify what those needs are broadly, right? In terms of goals, right? It may very well be early childhood education, and I'm completely on board with what Allison said there as well. But it seems like many of us have a snapshot of needs, but we don't have kind of a collective sense of where within the community are our needs most pressing, because it seems to me like those are the places where we have the most potential for transformation, the most potential for opportunity, and the most potential to address some of the inequities that might have been here before COVID and maybe exacerbated by COVID. So
Yeah.
the short of that would be, as a goal, would be really trying to establish what do we think the broad needs of Bristol residents, the town itself, really are.
And Mike, I have to say that you hit the nail on the head. I think with what the intent of this agenda item is to identify kind of some of what's going to lead to our next steps.
Yeah.
So that was a
Great.
good thing.
Diane. Go ahead and unmute Diane.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to get my camera, oh, there it is, the video back on.
Oh, now you're muted again.
I had over the last month or so just mentioned to different people as I was talking. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because my screen says done speaking. But anyways, I had been mentioning to people that the committee was going to be talking about how could we spend our money?
Yeah.
So, and I didn't address process with them or how it was going to take place, but I just said, if you had a lot of money, what do you think Bristol should do with it? So I have a short list of the kinds of things that people came up with, what they identified. And one of them is, I think her name was Allison, was talking about early education. One person specifically talked about pre-K education and funding for that, and somehow, how that takes place, and that includes childcare in collaboration with other agencies. Broadband coverage was one of the things that was mentioned. The onset of electric vehicles becoming a big part of our lives, and charging units and rebates and all that kind of stuff. Weatherization and home insulation needs, opioid treatment. A very specific thing that came under Bristol infrastructure. I mean, a couple people said infrastructure. As a town health officer, I had a specific complaint about a septic system that is up above Basin Street, if everyone knows where Basin Street is, that results in great odor issues down in Basin Street. So I think that's, that should be looked at, and because the correction to that would be a very expensive process. And also along the Basin Street issue is the access of up and down on Basin Street in the winter. For example, it impacts emergency vehicle ability to go down or up the hills. And that again would be a big expensive project to try to correct Basin Street, because it's just so steep. It's really dangerous. And the other suggestion that was thrown out was a couple people thought Bristol should have a food shelf.
We have a food shelf.
What is it? Where is it?
The Have a Heart food shelf.
Once a month.
Yes.
Once a month on Friday evening.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But, I think of food shelves as like what Hope has, where you actually walk into a setting and you survey the shelves and you pick up what you need. And you can do that 5 days a week, because people can't always drive to Middlebury. They sometimes need food, not on Friday evening once a month, but more often.
Right.
So that's just a whole project. And like I said, I didn't address process and how that would happen, but those are the kinds of things that people were thinking about.
Okay, those are good things. And we will collect more of those too. I think talking to individuals as we go along is great, but we're going to talk about a process to do that when we talk about public engagement next.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Jessica has her hand up. You want to add to this?
I was just going to say that I thought that Mike and Diane had really good points about trying to reach out and collect different ideas about, what's going on in the community. The work that I do in participatory development, we always, it's sort of a joke, but it's not really funny, but we always have this sort of joke where we say, if you go to a poor community and you say, why are you poor? They all say, I don't have enough money. But the reason they don't have enough money is from lots of different reasons. And so I think what's really important is not so much to say, if you had $1 million, how would you spend it? But to try to figure out what the invisible barriers are to people leading better lives or expanding their businesses or opening a business. And those people all know what those things are, so they're not invisible to them. And so I hope that the process that you undertake will try to uncover what some of those things are.
And speaking of process.
Sorry, one more comment then.
Oh, sure.
Sorry, I would love to figure out how to raise my hand, and probably after 2.5 years, I should know, but one day. I'm totally on board with all this, and I think it's absolutely important that we engage Bristol stakeholders. And I wanted to add one more maybe way to think about it from another perspective, which is I think it's really equally vital that we try to keep tabs on what the state more broadly is doing in terms of recovery. I'd hate to see us implement some great ideas, implement a plan, spend Bristol's money, and then the state 6 months later say, we've got this great program that's going to address X, Y, or Z. And we think, wow, we just used the money that the state has already made available more broadly, right? So I think we both need to be looking for what Bristol needs, but also make sure that we look for other sources that might be addressing similar issues and make sure that we don't duplicate those efforts. So those would be the two ways I think in terms of initial goals that I would think about looking for.
Yeah. Okay. Chris.
Yeah, so just to sort of follow, I think we're almost getting in the weeds a little bit, starting getting into the details. But my vision on this, is just from what I said before, is what my 3 words were, is I really want us to be able to take this opportunity and maximize this dollar to impact and help as many people as possible. And in a way, sort of leave our community some sort of a legacy from this capital infusion that we're seeing, that our children and our grandchildren can see and benefit from, and not just the short term. So sort of looking long term and big picture is very imperative for this group, I believe.
Great. So what I'm imagining happening, just one sec, Valerie, is taking these ideas and the sticky notes. So if we were all in a room together, we would have 2 flip charts right now. One would be the sticky notes and the other would be the things that you just said. So the sticky notes were just like a quick idea or a thought, which is kind of gives us an overarching, and then we have some more detailed things. And so for our next meeting, I will meld these together and present it back to us so we can work from it, and we'll continue to talk about how our hopes and goals are evolving over time. And if there's any more thoughts here, we can throw them in, but then we'll move on to talk about public engagement and next steps. So that's sort of where we're going to go with this. So just so you know that, my drive is always very outcome oriented. So it's always my intention to take what we do and then to use it as we move forward. So it's not like, oh, we talked about that, and then, oh God, just make us vomit, we're going to talk about it again 6 more times. Like, no, I'm going to take it, we're going to explore it, we're going to continue to use it as a, we'll have our goals, and that will help sort of chart our course, but we're not going to keep coming back to it, nor are we going to just forget that we ever talked about it. So it's going to be a piece that we'll have moving forward to provide a little bit of structure to what we do. Valerie, you looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I just want to add, is that me? Anyway, I just wanted to add that I had also envisioned if we were in a room together and had wall space that I would have, or maybe we can do it through spreadsheets and online somehow, but a spreadsheet that lists all of those areas that are of eligible uses in one column, list all of the requests that we've already received from people and that continue to evolve, and then match them up to see where they align with what the eligibility criteria are, and then the dollar amounts that are being requested, so that we can get we can visualize the areas that are being requested and the amount of money that's already being asked to be put on the table. Of course, that kind of presentation would evolve over time, but it would help us. It would help me. Evaluate just so figuring out a way to do that.
So yeah, we'll definitely do that. I think it's a great idea. So we'll create a matrix that's a visual of showing, the ARPA spending options and parameters, our goals, which are going to weigh into that, right? So our goals are going to help shape where we're going. And then the requests that we get will fall into that, and we can look at that as we go along. But also, to be clear, and I see you, Betsy, and I'm not going to ignore you, but that we have a lot of engagement process first. So we're not at a point on our first meeting in March 2022, where we're going to start saying, well, we should spend X amount for this and X amount for that. We have a lot of engagement to do first. So public engagement is a huge thing. And I want us to really take that seriously and spend some important time there, not going in with preconceived notions about our, special interest or projects that we should spend on, but trying to engage the community. So I want to talk about that next. But if there's more here on goals, let's go ahead and put that up there, and then let's have a conversation about engagement. Thank you, Betsy, for being patient while I got up there on that soapbox.
Okay, I would just like to ask that the things like spreadsheets would come in hard copy for the digitally incompetent. And I don't think I'm the only one on the committee who might not actually be able to get a spreadsheet onto their computer in readable form.
That's a great point. Although I'm kind of hoping we might be in person, as we move ahead a little bit. So that would be
but
great.
it is helpful to have those things in your own home and not just once a month. And there's a certain amount of stuff that links that I have not been able to open and things like that. So it is a little difficult for those of us that are not in academic settings or have teenagers at home.
Or might have older computers and older machines that might not.
Well, absolutely, older machines, but I mean, I came into this very late as a construction worker. I like when the mouse would freeze, I'd have to call a repairman and pay $100,
Right.
because I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't have somebody in the office that I could say, hey, what do I do about this?
Right.
So some of us really don't know how to do fancy stuff, like how to raise your hand with digital. I can't do that. I don't know what it's called. I don't see a picture of a hand that I would click.
Yeah. So that's a great point. And I will talk to Valerie afterwards and make sure that we make an effort to contact each member of the committee. And so for people who have a preference to receive things in a certain format, we can get it to you physically if that's easier than having digital access. And for people who, prefer it the other way, we can do it that. But that's an excellent point on inclusion. And thank you for raising that.
Let's include the whole committee.
Right. Anthony.
Sorry. I guess one of my things I was just mulling over with the concept of connectivity, just as a fact, Vermont is one of the few states right now that is struggling with internet. It has a really hard time trying to branch out across the state and get to those hard to reach areas. So as far as like internet and that whole concept, I mean, there's a lot of different independent Vermont companies that do internet. So it's really sectionalized at this point. So I'm wondering if like I'm obviously I can't make I can make recommendations, but I'm not on the committee. So this is just more of a thought than anything else right now. Where that might be really beneficial to the town to strengthen and further develop its connectivity across the whole town.
Yeah, well, broadband is certainly on the ARPA list, so that's a possibility for us, and that's an area we should research to see, what the need is there. It's good. Chris, did you take your hand down, or did you just get tired of holding it up? You took it down? Okay, great. Should we go ahead and talk about public engagement?
Yes.
Are we ready to go there? Can I share my screen again, or are you guys just sick of looking at that? I like to have visuals when I'm looking at things. I was thinking about next steps, and what I'd really like to do is gather data. I think that we've heard that from a couple of different angles, that we need to gather data about negative impacts, about other towns' approaches and ideas. We're hearing maybe we need some data on broadband, et cetera. So what I'd like to do when we talk about public engagement is think about how we're going to reach out to people and who we're going to reach out to. What I was thinking for that is that we maybe break ourselves down into teams. And so between now and our next meeting, that we have one team that is going to make a personal outreach to town departments, one team that's going to reach out to organizations, nonprofits, and organizations that provide services and resources to our community, one team that's going to personally approach all the businesses in our community, and one team that's going to talk to the schools. Now, the schools also are getting money. I think it's not called ARPA, it's called ESSA or something. I don't know exactly how that is. But what I'm interested in is, what are they doing with their money? What are the needs and gaps that they're trying to fill? What are the needs and gaps that they're not able to fill? And one of the things that the VLCT guidance said, would be good is to collaborate. So we could collaborate with Middlebury and Virgins. We could collaborate with the schools. We could collaborate with, different entities. And I think that the schools are a really important aspect of our community. And so I'd like to see us reach out to them. And what I was thinking that I'd like to propose is that we put together teams, and that between now and next month, those teams think about how they're going to reach out to these communities or these groups of communities, and that we follow a format of like a focus group where we actually bring people together and go through a series of questions. And if people aren't able to come or don't want to come, that we then actually reach out to them and give them an opportunity to weigh in. And we do this with these 4 categories first, and then we go to the general public as well, so that every person in Bristol will have the opportunity to weigh into our committee, but that we start strategically with these sort of categories of groups. I see your hand, Valerie. Do you want to weigh in before I tell you how I was thinking of doing that?
Just a question. Where would childcare fit in? Are they a business?
I think that they might be a nonprofit or business or schools, because there's, there's pre-K at the school. There are private businesses that run in-home daycare, and there's, I think the bottom of Stony Hill, I think they're a nonprofit. Right? So, some people might fall into multiple categories, and the beauty of a focus group is nobody's going to spit in your eye if you go to the wrong one.
Gotcha.
So I actually wanted to ask Jessica to talk to us a little bit about focus groups, because we're lucky in Bristol to have somebody who literally does this for a living, and this is her professional field. And so I would love her input, and actually would love to create some sort of consistency among the focus groups, have her work with us to make that happen when we get ready to do that. So the next month we would be talking about how we're going to do it, and then we would move forward and actually do it. I don't know if you, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Jessica, but.
No, that's fine. I would be happy to share the questions that we usually use, and then they can be adapted for each one of these groups. And then I do have access to different software packages that I usually use to, like your eye can catch certain patterns, but then also it's sort of an AI program that will look for the trends in different words and choices that people are making to see like if there are priorities or if different groups correspond about different things. So I'm also happy to help in any way that I can.
Great. Yeah, Elizabeth or Betsy.
I'm not sure I understand the focus group process, but like with my interest in water and sewer, I would want to, I mean, that's a town department. And,
Yes.
but also it seems it would make sense to talk to those who are dealing with water and sewer, like plumbers and septic providers and dumpers, because they might know what the town is missing that it doesn't have. So which focus group? I mean, my focus is an area, and then I would want to talk to the public and say, what do you think about the amount of chlorine in the water, or that kind of thing. So it seems to me that that's my focus, and I don't understand how coming to understand the need in that area fits into a focus group.
So as a committee member, you may want to choose which of these outreach teams you will be on. But as a person who's interested in water and sewer as a potential use of these funds, you will be glad to know that it may come up at any of these meetings. So
but I wouldn't be attending those meetings to share.
There's no rule saying that committee members couldn't go to different focus groups. So you could certainly go. However, as a committee member, it would not be our role to speak at those focus groups. So we're not going to go to the focus groups and say, hey, y'all, let's talk about this. We're going to go to listen and to observe and to learn from them. So the focus group is so that we can hear from them. So what I really want to invite all of us to do is keep an open mind about what this money should best be spent for. And if any of us have a particular passion, as you have expressed that you do, there will be opportunity for you to share that, and certainly for you to help us hear those needs from our neighbors and our community members. But that we're going to continue to keep the door as wide open as we can to hear the broadest needs in the community from as many different corners of the community as we can hear from. So the effort that we're looking at in the next month is to think about how can we make sure that we do good listening to all the town departments? How can we make sure that we do good listening to our nonprofits and organizations that provide services? How can we do good listening to all of our businesses? How can we do good listening to the schools? Then we'll come up with how we're going to try to do that good listening. Then we'll do the listening. We'll look at what that comes back to us with. Then we'll go to the general public and we'll try to gather information and listening from there. And then we will layer that onto it. So over the course of the next several months, hopefully by the end of the summer, we as a team will have a really good understanding of where there are needs and gaps within the community. So each of us may feel that we already know where certain gaps are, or we may have a particular passion for a particular area, but we're not going to let that drive the bus, which doesn't mean we can't bring our own opinions, but it means that we're going to be as inclusive as we can.
Okay, and the public doesn't need to go to the focus groups, right?
Well,
I mean, because
the public is I mean, a lot of the public is going to be in one or more of these groups.
Well, the young and middle-aged public, but the elderly aren't gonna likely be there, and the people that are working 5 jobs aren't gonna be there. So we need to make sure that
Yes.
that doesn't become a sieve that is actually disenfranchising some of the community.
Yes, of course. Good point. And so this is the first step, as I'm imagining it, not the end all. Mike?
Yeah, and I'll be very brief because I recognize we're coming towards the end of our time, perhaps. I just was wondering, Porter, if you could clarify sort of the rationale for this particular approach in terms of first prioritizing focus groups and then going to the public at large. Just getting a sense of the sort of why that would be the best course, you think, as opposed to running these simultaneously or in the other order, like just a little window into your thought here.
I have some thoughts, and I'm happy to listen to thoughts from others as well. But my thought was that these categories of stakeholders are already thinking hard about these issues. And, you know, they already have methods and processes in place to identify where there are gaps. So they might be, you know, they might be more readily able to come up with ideas, and then we can give the public, you know, some sort of something to respond to, rather than just something random.
Yeah, I like that. You know, I think the benefit obviously is, as you articulate quite nicely, that they might have more direct contact with some of these pressing needs. The thing that I think we should be wary of and be cognizant of is I'd hate for this to then fully shape the options that are presented or shape the dialogue moving forward.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we have ways to account for that, but just wanted to put those 2 cents in.
That's a great point. Jessica?
I was just going to add to what you both had said that oftentimes what we find with community participation is that when you get all of these surveys, if you sort of ask people, you know, what they want investment in, they give you a lot of information. And so you have to do a lot of work to try to pull out these like points in common. And so what's nice about going to these already organized entities first is they already know what their interests are. They know what their challenges are. You know, they most likely have an agenda. And so they've already like done that thought and all that work for you. And so you can easily sort of capture those. You should absolutely go to the public, but that is a little bit more work. And sometimes it's also useful, I'm sure with public transparency, you'll be sharing out, you know, what you find in the focus groups. But sometimes, you know, as a community member, you feel like maybe the downtown should be more vibrant or something like that, but you don't really know what the problem is. And then when you see like what some of the businesses say about why the downtown isn't all that vibrant, it sort of shapes your thinking a little bit in a good way, I think. So you're absolutely right. I think you should collect both kinds of information. These are just easier. You won't have to do as much work.
Any other thoughts, questions, observations?
Yeah, I have a question. While you were talking, I looked up the definition of ARPA and what the money is to be used for, what the intent of the federal government was to provide this money. And it's to speed up recovery from the economic and health effects of the COVID pandemic and the recession. And I feel as though we need to constantly remind ourselves that this isn't to just do something really great for Bristol if it has nothing to do with how did COVID and the pandemic affect this community, and how can we use this money to counteract or help recovery. So that's just an aside, but I think it's an important thing to remind ourselves that this isn't just money to do whatever we've always wanted to do for Bristol, a better 4th of July parade, you know, does that help to do?
And that's a great point that you raised, Helen. And I guess the question that, you know, that begs is, you know, how is Bristol, explicitly Bristol, damaged by COVID? Right. And I don't know how we answer that. I wonder if people have, you know, reactions to what we should be looking at, what we should be evaluating or measuring in order to determine what, if we're trying to speed up the recovery from the effects of COVID, how do we identify in Bristol what those are?
Right.
Anybody have ideas on that?
That might be first steps. How do we recognize, how do we acknowledge what those are?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just come up with a wish list of how Bristol could spend $1 million. That's
Right.
not the point. The point is, this is specifically tagged to speed the recovery from the pandemic. So, I mean, I know that it's late and we shouldn't do this now, but maybe that should be what we start the next meeting with our ideas or talking with other people. How did COVID affect your business, your office, your children, your schooling, your food access, all of that kind of stuff?
Can we do that as part of the focus group? Like, do we have to wait? Because I feel like there's several places like, yes, I want to ask that of various stakeholders, my neighbors, as well as anyone in a generic focus group. But I also, can we ask that at the same time? Can we say, what have you experienced, observed, or perceived to be the negative effects? And then what are, the areas of need that you hope to see?
Right. But I think it's important to not, if we break up into these focus groups and ask these different areas, not just how would you like to see the money spent, but
right.
In light of the goal of this money is to speed the recovery from the pandemic. Now, right. How do you see that money being spent?
Yeah. And what I was imagining is that we would come up with sort of a framework to ask those questions so that we're being consistent with all of the groups, and also consistent as we then, as like Diane has so, actively done already, like said, like, what do you think? What do you think? But if we can create a framework for that so that we're, we're saying, what do you think within this context of speeding recovery from COVID for general areas, and so that will help us sort of build that matrix so that we can see, what the demands or requests are and how they fit together. So we can be sort of developing that. So yeah, I do think next time what I want to talk about is what that framework is going to look like, how we're going to convene these various groups, how we're going to reach out to them and make sure they know that we want to hear from them, and have those conversations.
Yep.
So it is 8:30. And so I would love to hear if you have a particular interest in being on one of the focus groups. That would be great. If you don't have a particular interest, then, maybe we'll just sort of divvy it up. Allison put in the chat that she wants to be on the school one. That's cool. I don't, do other people have strong opinions about like which one they'd like to be on? I might just share this and type it up there. Diane?
I'd like to be on the school department, town departments in that group. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
Okay. And can I just throw in a slightly off-topic question for Valerie? Valerie, can you provide for us a list of everyone that's on this committee? Because I have a list from January 26th, and there's a whole bunch of people here tonight that aren't on that list. So can you just pull together a group of all the names? I mean, a paper of all the names?
They're on our agenda in the very upper left-hand corner.
Oh, I don't have that in front of me. Okay, and everyone is everyone's
Diane,
on the list.
No, we have guests today. So
okay.
Jim, Bob, Ian, Anthony, and Jessica are guests.
Oh, I see.
It's a
Okay,
public
that's
meeting,
why I
so-
was confused.
Yeah,
Okay.
anybody can come. It's a public
Okay,
meeting.
thank you. Thank you.
And that's true about all of our meetings, isn't it?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Chris.
And I believe early on, when folks were first appointed, I did send out a contacts sheet. I will definitely send another one out.
Thanks.
Are good. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking for, town departments is fine too. I mean, that's where I spend most of my time. So I've got that would make the most sense for me.
I'd like to be on the town departments and the businesses.
Both. Porter, I'll fit in wherever is needed. That's Helen.
Okay, super. Rob, John? Mike?
I don't have any preference. I can't say there's any particular area I'd be more helpful than others.
Okay.
So
I'm flexible too, Porter. So
Okay.
you know, it seems like there's no one in nonprofit, so I can spearhead that if that's useful. But if you need to move me, feel free to.
Okay. And John?
Nope.
What do you think? Oh. You muted and then you unmuted, John. Do you have an opinion? Do you want me to just plug you in? That's right. We'll sort it out. Okay. So let me just do this one. So we're gonna see if we can get people to just talk a little bit about your group and who might be in that group and how you might gather them or get them together. We'll talk about gathering data, and then I had actually identified that we needed to gather information regarding negative impacts. What I was picturing there was maybe that I might be just asking Valerie to see what the town has or what the state has for us. So we can see if we can get information from, I don't know whether it's regional planning or economic development, or, like if you can provide us with anything, and then we can look further if we want to augment that, but at least get a start there. I'm also really curious what other towns are doing, what their approaches are, and what ideas they have. So I'm curious to see if we can gather some of that information. So in April, we'll talk about the focus group idea a little bit more. We'll talk about what data we did or didn't get and what else we want. And we'll go from there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. So we'll send some information out so that you can talk amongst your group, and we'll go from there. Thoughts, questions? I guess that is the anything else category of Anthony, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if the committee would like, I can reach out to other municipalities. As the treasurer, I can check with other treasurers to see what their thoughts are and what they plan on doing with ARPA funding.
Thank
If
you.
you guys would like, that is.
Yeah, that would be super. Thank you. Allison.
Hi. So just for the note-taking purposes, our actionable steps are what we have under March. Is that correct? The preparing of the focus groups, the gathering of data, negative impacts, and gathering data regarding the town's approaches and other ideas.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And so specifically, if you're looking like, wait, what did I just sign up to do? Each person on the committee is that you'll be getting some information from me and or Valerie and possibly Jessica saying, here's some things to think about in a focus group. And so then you can talk to the other team member or two who's in your group and just brainstorm a little bit. And we'll give you some questions to start to think about. And then when we come together, you can say, like, here's how we're thinking we might, try to get businesses to come to a focus group. Here's when and where, we think it might appeal to them. And so we'll start to be creating the structure. So you don't have to decide what you're going to ask them. We'll do that together as a group. You just want to start to think about how you're going to engage, like how you're going to get to them and get them to come. So Ian, hand up. And Anthony, your hand's up too. I don't know if that's still up or up again. So Ian, you can go first, and then Anthony, you can go if you got
No,
more.
sorry, hold on.
Okay.
I had a question regarding public input and suggestions. I've received a bunch of emails over the
Oh, yeah.
last few months. And now that this committee is an official committee and you're the chair, how should that kind of communication be handled?
Yes, I don't know.
I mean, that's so someone emails me and says, "Hey, what's the potential of getting some of this money?
Yeah.
Do I send that to Val? Do I send that to you now as the chair of this new committee? What's preferable?"
I would recommend you send it forward to me like you have done several times before.
Okay.
And I've been maintaining a collection, and I will try to coordinate and maintain that.
Yeah, and the message can be, thank you so much for thinking of this. This is good. Very glad to hear from you. The committee has gotten together and is starting to move forward. They're looking at gathering data and doing some focus groups, and then they'll do some public outreach. Stay tuned. We'll be in touch. And then what we can do is, if you've already received stuff, then when we do come to doing something with the general public, we could actually email every single one of those people back and say, like, hey, you had some great ideas a couple months ago. We're really reaching out to the public now. We'd love to hear from you again and talk with you some more. Here's the process. So let's definitely keep all of that and make sure that we appreciate and honor them for taking the initiative, and let them know that we're not going to ignore them or forget about them, but we're not ready yet.
And that relates to, if I could jump in, that relates to what I was saying earlier about developing this matrix. Whereas if we were in a room and could spread this thing along the walls, the criteria, the requests received, the variety, the amount of money that's being requested, so that folks can see how it looks, how it just fits all together that way, or doesn't fit together.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important too, that some of the requests that folks might feel passionately about, they'll see that it really doesn't fit into the criteria that we have to work with. And it's an understandable outcome.
Yeah.
So as a follow-up to that, is that matrix, however it might be presented, is that going to be publicly available?
Everything would be publicly available.
Okay.
When it's available.
When we do
okay.
it.
And I'm
right now
yeah,
it's in my imagination.
Right. And I'm happy to work with you on that. A follow-up question to my previous one. So obviously as a select board member, we're going to be presenting our thoughts in terms of what the board might present and put on into that matrix. If there are additional thoughts that I have or other select board members have, can they be submitted as an individual? I assume so, but I just wanted to check.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I said
Yes.
town departments, I should have included the select board. That would be on that outreach too. But yeah, individuals are individuals by all means.
And I currently have that slotted on the March 14th select board agenda to begin that conversation, although the agenda is packing in pretty full. So I don't know if we'll actually have time to get there, but it is, there is a plan to have as a select board discussion to talk about those things.
So are we likely to be meeting on the 11th of April then?
Let's look at our calendars.
That is
I'm
a
not sure.
select board meeting night. The select board meets on the 2nd and 4th. Now, Chris, you had I think the more constrained or a constrained meeting night schedule.
Yeah, I have meetings just about every night. So it's finding one night between the three towns that I have an opening is a challenge. I've got a couple Mondays and possibly some Tuesdays, but not very often. Mondays, I have a few Mondays here, and that's what I'm looking up right now, and I'll clarify those in a moment.
Today is a first Monday. Should we say the first Monday?
Let me just double check to make sure. That's what I'm literally checking as we speak.
So that would be April 4th.
Yeah. I'm going to pitch it. first Monday. So our meetings will be first Monday, unless we decide to skip or we're not ready or whatever, but let's just go with first Monday and hope for the best on that.
Yeah,
So,
first Mondays are good. Second
Okay.
and fourth are bad, so first is
Okay.
good.
So we'll stick with the first Monday. We'll plan to meet again April 4th by Zoom. We'll hope that by May we're doing things in person. If people are feeling comfortable, we can talk about that. So we'll put that on our agenda, is in person moving forward. I will get some information out to you guys before end of day tomorrow. And then I'm going to be out of town for 11 days. So I want to get some stuff out to you before I go, so people can be, thinking and talking. I don't think it's a huge ask, just a little bit of conversation and thought with fellow committee members to think about, what you might want to suggest to the group for moving forward with that.
And I just want to reiterate that a quorum within that conversation, if it's by email, needs to be, I should clarify even more that if it's a quorum having a conversation, it needs to be a warned meeting.
So just so I understand, so if what we're asking people to do is to have a conversation about ideas, about how we might pursue outreach, that's not a substantive conversation, is it? They're not making a decision. They're not end running around the committee. What they're doing is exploring ideas so that they can come to the committee and say, here's how we think we should proceed with that. That's not a problem, is it?
If it's an email to the entire committee and the entire members of the entire committee reply, that's an open meeting conversation. But if it's one member to one or two other members or so, then that's fine.
What we're asking, this is kind of like a subcommittee of people to talk about ideas to bring to the big group. We're not making any decisions. We're not taking any action. We're not expending any funds.
Right.
All we're doing is trying to be creative and not doing it once a month in a big group. And there's going to be 3, maybe 4 people on a group. That's not even a quorum anyway, right? What's a quorum out of how many of us are there?
I think we have 9 members.
So what's a quorum? 5?
5.
Yeah. So it won't be 5.
Yeah. So yeah,
but I think that we can have a larger conversation about transient documents and what is actually documentable, but we're not making any decisions, expending funds, or debating policy. We're brainstorming ideas to bring to the bigger group, and that should be okay.
Yeah, we've done that before between planning commissions with subcommittees, as far as taking 2 or 3 people to focus on something to bring back data to the larger group, and that's where the open discussion occurs in the next meeting with the quorum.
Right. So, all right. So I think we're ready to adjourn. I just want to clarify for Allison's sake what she's supposed to do with whatever minutes she took. Does she send them to me? Does she send them to Val?
If you want, you can send them. I mean, I can post them. If she wants to email them to me, I post planning commission and DRB meeting minutes and that kind of stuff out to the web as well. So if you want, I can handle that. If you'd like to send them to me.
And I just want to make sure that we get you like the slides. So, because I think that's a substantive part of the meeting. So we want to make sure you have that. So I will get that to you, Allison, and then we can send it all to Chris. Okay.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you, the 3 of you. And I must say, I think we've covered a lot of ground tonight on a pretty complex endeavor.
In
So-
general, I would like to try to be done at 8:30 as a rule. So I apologize for going a little bit longer today, but I'm glad that we got to talk, and it's really nice to see everybody, even if we're not in person. Cute dog there, Allison. I see it. Anybody have any other thoughts or questions before we adjourn? All right.
Just
thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.